Alright everyone, let's dig into this update, because over the next week or two, we're going to be dealing with multiple surges of Arctic air and several windows where winter storms could try to develop. This is one of those stretches where the pattern doesn't just flip once, it reloads again and again, and that's exactly what makes it so interesting and potentially impactful. When I zoom things out and look at the broader North American setup, the first thing that jumps off the map is just how extreme the cold has been in Alaska. We're not talking about normal winter cold. We're talking about historic, dangerous cold, temperatures plunging to around 50 below zero, and in Fairbanks, an incredible stretch of roughly 30 straight days below zero. That kind of cold doesn't just stay put forever. Eventually, parts of it find a way south, and that's exactly what we're starting to see unfold. The first notable push of Arctic air begins to organize as we head into midweek. By Wednesday, that cold air starts spilling into the Great Lakes region, and it doesn't come quietly. This surge is accompanied by strong winds, especially across the plains and the upper Midwest. Gusts could reach 30 to 40 miles per hour at times, making it feel even colder than the raw temperatures suggest. And this is just the opening act. Each successive cold front looks capable of bringing even colder air as we move toward the latter half of the week and into next week. By the way, if you'd like specific weather forecasts for your region or city, please leave them in the comments. I'll answer them individually as time allows. Also, if you like the video and subscribe to my channel, you'd be very grateful. Now let's move on. By Thursday, that cold air really stretches out, covering much of the eastern two-thirds of the country. Meanwhile, the western U.S. stays largely protected under a ridge of high pressure. That ridge is important because it helps steer the cold south and east rather than west. As a result, the upper Midwest, the Ohio and Tennessee valleys, and eventually the southeast all get pulled into this Arctic influence. And yes, that includes Florida. This isn't just a brush with cool weather. Parts of the southeast, including areas of Georgia, South Carolina, and even northern Florida, are looking at freeze conditions. Some spots could see a hard freeze, which is a big deal for this time of year in those regions. Every time we track a pattern like this, it's a reminder of just how interconnected everything is. Snowpack building in one region feeds rivers months later. Cold air outbreaks stress ecosystems and wildlife. Jet stream dips thousands of miles away can shape local weather in dramatic ways. Winter isn't just something we experience, it actively reshapes the landscape beneath it. And this particular stretch of winter is doing exactly that. Now, after that first surge, we don't get much of a break. A secondary push of Arctic air starts to take shape by Friday. This one tracks a bit farther west initially, but it still delivers a glancing blow to much of the Central Plains while reinforcing the cold across the eastern U.S. This second surge also introduces our first real winter storm opportunity in this stretch, mainly in the form of Clipper-type systems. As we move into Friday and Saturday, pieces of energy drop south out of Canada into the Great Lakes. These systems aren't huge on their own, but they're efficient snow producers. Expect snow showers and bands to develop around the Great Lakes, spilling into the Ohio Valley, parts of the Northeast, and up into upstate New York. The snowbelt regions in particular will continue to do what they do best in this setup. Farther south and west, snow chances are more limited. You might see a few flurries across Kansas or parts of Oklahoma, but for most areas, this is more about the cold than the snow. The better snow potential stays from Tennessee northward into Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and the Great Lakes region. And behind this system, the cold deepens again. By the time we wake up Sunday morning, around January 18th, the cold really flexes. This air mass once again mostly misses the heart of the Central Plains, but the eastern side of Oklahoma, far eastern Texas, much of Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, and northern Georgia feel the full force. Morning lows could dip into the teens in some spots, with widespread 20s across much of the Deep South. For many of these areas, this could easily end up being the coldest air of the season so far. And this cold doesn't just vanish after sunrise, it likely lingers into Monday as well. Up in the upper levels of the atmosphere, you can clearly see what's driving this. The jet stream takes on a pronounced dip across the eastern two-thirds of the U.S. This time, though, there's an important difference. The ridge on the western side of the pattern starts to amplify and lift northward into Alaska. That's huge, because Alaska has been locked in brutal cold for weeks. As that ridge builds, Alaska finally begins to warm. And historically, that's often a signal that some of the cold stored up there is about to be released southward later on. When we look at the Climate Prediction Center outlooks for the January 18th through 22nd window, they line up well with this idea. Two distinct surges of Arctic air are highlighted, both focused mainly on the eastern two-thirds of the country. The central U.S. continues to get more glancing blows, while the west remains relatively mild. But what really stands out is Alaska. For the first time this winter, we're seeing above-average temperatures forecast there. That's a major pattern shift, and it often precedes changes downstream across the lower 48. Teleconnections back this up. The Eastern Pacific Oscillation dips negative around the 17th and 18th, matching those Arctic surges, and it stays negative into the second half of January. That favors continued cold air transport from Canada into the U.S. At the same time, the North Atlantic Oscillation trends negative as well. This is important because it helps slow the flow. Up until now, systems have been racing west to east, giving them very little time to tap into moisture. As blocking increases and the flow slows down after the 20th, storms have a much better chance to organize and produce meaningful precipitation. That's where things start to get more interesting. As we approach the January 20th timeframe, the subtropical jet begins to wake up while the polar jet continues dipping south. Even places that have been very dry lately, like Texas and parts of Oklahoma, start to see precipitation chances creep back into the picture. That overlap of cold air and moisture is exactly what we need for more significant winter weather. Looking at ensemble guidance around the 21st, much of the eastern U.S. remains locked into cold air, while the central U.S. starts to rebound and warm. But the ridge this time is different. It extends deep into western Canada, and nearly all of Alaska turns warm. That configuration strongly suggests that some of the coldest air bottled up in Alaska and western Canada may finally be dislodged. As we head toward the 24th and 25th, both the European and GFS ensembles start converging on this idea. Blocking develops in key locations, and colder anomalies press farther south, not just into the northern tier, but potentially into the central U.S. as well. If this plays out, we could be looking at the coldest air mass of the season, with an intense temperature gradient setting the stage for more impactful winter storms. So the takeaway here is this: winter is far from done. In fact, the pattern looks like it's gearing up for a more active and potentially more extreme phase as we move toward the end of January. Multiple cold blasts, increasing chances for snow, and a setup that finally looks capable of producing something more organized than what we've seen so far. As always, I appreciate you being here and tracking this with me. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next update, because the next week or two could get very interesting. I'll be here breaking it all down before and after each system, keeping you informed every step of the way.